If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I wanted to ask one of the top demographers in the country, and that is Wendell Cox. Wendell is someone who works with me at Unleashed Prosperity. He's been working in this field for, decades, as long as I've known him. And he knows what's going on with where people are living, why they're living there. He's a transportation expert. Wendell, thanks so much for joining this afternoon. I hope you had a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
So, Wendell, let's get right down to it. About a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, the Census Bureau came out with its estimates of what happened with population changes in 2024. And as I read your report that you put in our Unleashed Prosperity hotline, you highlighted two significant developments. And let's start with the first one. A big increase in the number of foreign-born who came into the country in 2024. And what do you make of that?
Well, it's too bad that the Census Bureau was not getting it right until now. Apparently, there are other federal agencies, and I don't remember which ones they were, that were tracking this. The Census Bureau had not been including what are called humanitarian immigrants. These are people, that are looking for asylum and where their governments are after them. So people are trying to get away from that kind of thing. Those numbers have not been included. And in fact, the Census Bureau admits that something like 5.8 million additional migrants were in the humanitarian category. So what we've had is a huge increase in overall international migration. In fact, this would make 2024, the present year, that would be the year ended June 30th, the largest international migration year in U.S. history. So that is very significant.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying, because obviously there was a big influx of foreign-born. Now, there are different categories of immigrants who come into the country. Obviously, we have legal immigrants who have visas, and I think that's certainly most of the immigrants who come in each year. But then, so that was probably well over 1 million than last year, right? This past year, over the last 12 months. But then you have, now when you say the humanitarian immigrants, are you talking about asylum seekers?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Census Bureau is basically saying this is a recent development, but they didn't really get into it much. But that is over, just about a 5-year period, an additional 5.8 million.
Wow.
And so the additional the migrant gain this year, that is through June 30th, was about 2.7 or 2.8 million people, wow, which is very, very significant. That's
very significant. Now,
Chicago.
Are these asylum seekers, are they in the country legally or illegally?
Well, they would be in the country legally because they couldn't. I presume that. I don't know immigration law, but I don't imagine that you would be classified by the government as an asylum seeker unless you were already determined to be one or were in the process of trying to be determined. But I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that legally.
Well, I don't know either. I think, Wendell, though, it may be that's, a significant number of them, and I'm just hypothesizing here, that have basically come into the country without any kind of visa or approval of the U.S. government, and then they basically declare themselves an asylum seeker. So I don't exactly know how that works either, but the point is some of them probably are here illegally. And I was just wondering about that because so what about people who came in illegally that are not asylum seekers? Are they counted in this,
yes,
census estimate?
The Census Bureau has various means of estimating that. So they basically say that they count the people that get in legally and the people that don't get in legally, and they had never dealt with this humanitarian issue before.
Okay. And so, but most of these people who are coming in each year are legal immigrants. They're lawful immigrants. Is that right?
It's hard to see that. I haven't seen any good figures. I mean, Goldman Sachs is estimating that 60% are not legal. On the other hand, I don't know if their numbers include the humanitarians. So, I mean, this raised incredible questions all of a sudden for me yesterday when I saw the data for the first time.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's a big issue, especially for our audience in the New York area, because there's so many of these illegal migrants and asylum seekers are located in New York City, and it's been a big problem, frankly, for New York with the especially with the illegals who are being housed in hotels and things like that.
Yes, indeed, that is a big problem.
So let's talk about. On the other hand, we have a lot of legal immigrants who are coming into this country, and one of the things that we said in our hotline this past week is that without the immigrant foreign-born population entering the country, we didn't really have much population growth.
No, it's up a little bit, but not that much. I mean,
okay.
The total migrant level of as a share of the population increase, believe it or not, was about 80%. And by the way, this is a number that is typical in Australia and Canada, where they've got similar kinds of things going on. Those three nations are the most popular nations for people to immigrate to.
Yes. So, our position has been that legal immigration is good for the America, and that we have to keep out the illegal immigrants, because you can't have 10 million people in the country or more. We don't know the number that are not lawful citizens.
Yeah. And one of the great advantages, obviously, about legal immigration is you can basically vet people before they come.
Exactly.
You don't want to be taking in people who are, convicted criminals, for example. They'd never make the cuts. That's
a big problem. Absolutely. Yeah. Just tell people in New York about that. Now, let me ask you another question, if I may, and that is the other big story, of course, is something that we've covered and you've covered over many years, which is the large migration of people living in the United States, moving from one state to another. And Wendell, where are they going?
They are going to the South. It is unbelievable. And in fact, in terms of what we call net domestic migration, which is people moving across a state line within the United States, there are four big regions in the United States. There's the Northeast, which includes New England. There's the South, there's the Midwest, and there's the West. The only one of those regions that increased in domestic migration was the South. And this has been typical. Everybody's moving to the South. And if you look at the top 10s in terms of net domestic migration, in terms of the states, 7 of the 10 are in the South. And the only ones that aren't in the South are Arizona, Idaho, and Nevada. And by the way, immigration in those places is down. The immigration to the South is going up.
So what do you make of that? I mean, I'll tell you what I make of it, and I'd like your reaction to this. But, the southern states are pro-business. They tend to be right-to-work states. They also you look at the states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, which had big in-migration. Those states, as you know, Wendell, have no income tax versus the states that are losing population like New York and California, which just happen to have the highest income tax.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I attribute it to all of those things, plus one other huge thing, and that's the cost of living. And the cost of living is largely determined by differences in housing costs. If I buy a car here in St. Louis and you buy the same car in Maryland, we're probably going to pay something like the same amount of money. On the other hand, if I look at the cost of housing, say in the Washington, D.C. level versus where I live, it's huge. So those are the things. And by the way, take Oregon and Washington, which have been huge magnets for domestic migration over the last 2 decades. They've now dropped out of the top 10. Oregon is losing domestic migrants. And at the same time, Washington, you have Seattle the state of Washington has now imposed a capital gains tax, so you don't give them credit for a complete income tax.
That's a good point.
And the city of Seattle is now, Governor Inslee of Washington is proposing a wealth tax. Well, that's not going to get a whole lot to Washington.
Well, people with wealth will just go somewhere where they don't have to pay the wealth tax, right? And that happens all the time.
As Jeff Bezos already has.
And he has saved millions and millions. I heard he might have saved $1 billion. Now, I cannot confirm that number by moving out of, where was he, in California or?
Oh, no. He was in Seattle.
Oh, but he didn't want to pay all the new taxes. And they also have an estate tax there, too, that he won't have to pay now in Florida.
And by the way, I mean, it's not only a big amount of money for Jeff Bezos, but it's also a big amount of money for the state of Washington. The reasons Governor Inslee is asking for a wealth tax is to balance their out-of-control budget. Yeah. And if Jeff Bezos had stayed, they might not need the wealth tax.
Now, was there anything in this new report anything else you'd like to comment on? Because this comes out once a year. Everyone knows that the census does the decennial census that comes out every 10 years. This is a sample of a smaller sample, obviously, but it gives us good information about what's happening in America.
Well, yes, and you've got, for example, one of the things that continues to impress me is the performance of the state of Alabama, which has not always been ranked number one in anything in this country. Alabama ranked 7th in terms of the net domestic migration and has rated that well within the last 5 years. What's going on is parts of the South that are less expensive are getting migration from the rest of the country. Now, for the first year, Alabama has actually imported more people from the rest of the country than Georgia. Georgia has been hugely has had a huge population increase. Atlanta is growing very fast. And Tennessee is doing very well at this point, ranked 5th. Florida has dropped a bit, but there's a sifting going on within the South as well.
Yeah, well, let me, just for the benefit of our listeners, I'll give people your top 10. 85,000 moved net into Texas. They were number one. North Carolina was number two at 82,000 people moving in over the amount of people moving out. South Carolina at 68,000. Florida at 64,000. They fell a bit. I think that might be the hurricane effect. And then you have Tennessee. And you have Arizona, and there it is, Alabama, which used to be one of the poorest states in the country. And you're right, they moved ahead of Georgia. Yeah, and then Nevada and Idaho. Amazing stuff, Wendell. That's Wendell Cox, who's one of the top demographers in the country. He works with me at the Unleash Prosperity and is really one of the world's experts. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. Happy New Year to you, Wendell Cox.
Happy New Year, and thank you.
Eden Memorial Chapels understands Jewish funerals can take many forms. Some are Orthodox, while others are more conservative or of a Reformed nature. There's no one better. With services close to all New York and New Jersey cemeteries, Eden Memorial Chapels offer fair and balanced pricing and can provide easy transfer of you and your loved ones to Israel. While you're grieving, they're here to take care of all the details so that you deal with less bureaucracy and have more peace of mind. Go to EdenMemorial.com. That's EdenMemorial.com.